Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, so I think as everywhere else, we were seeing under COVID that people are using our streets differently. As you said, that families are out walking and cycling and joggers are running in the middle of the road. And we also saw car speed spiralling because of fewer cars on the road. And all this whilst having to socially distance safely. So we were acutely aware that our residents in Lambeth were putting themselves at risk of one danger to avoid another. Tiny context for Lambeth for people who don't know it. We're in a city London borough. 70% of our households live in flats, and we have a third of our children growing up in poverty, and the majority of our households in Lambeth don't own a car. So running through all of this is an equalities issue for us as well. So as you said, Chris, we were the first council to publish our emergency transport strategy in response to COVID-19, and we broke it down into phases. And the most immediate action we took was the pavement widening, and we did this at the worst pinch points in the borough. Now, these are quite temporary and rudimentary measures involving barriers building out into the traffic lane. And we used utility permit regulations to do this. I understand that other councils have used events regulations. And we've already implemented the first ones last week in different places in the borough. And last night, with TfL introduced pavement widening on Brixton High Road. For anyone who knows Brixton, that's right in the middle of Brixton. So that's quite a bold measure to take. And it's running between the KFC and Iceland because there was a real problem with social distancing there. But then we were looking at how do we manage our transport system safely now in lockdown and as restrictions ease. We know that there's going to be some form of social distancing in place generally, and as you said, Chris, the capacity on public transport is going to be down for a variety of reasons, and in London that is really significant. We don't know what the detail of these easing of restrictions will be yet, and that's one thing that has been difficult and challenging in COVID is sometimes a lack of detail, so leaving us to interpret. But we do know that children will be going back to school, residents will be going back to work, and we need to enable them to be able to access our town centres safely by walking and cycling, because as you said, we're expecting a rush back to the car. So it's how do we manage that safely, and how do we enable people to move around their neighbourhoods, to walk and cycle to the town centre? How do we prevent our roads becoming clogged up again, the rat running, and returning to the dirty air that we had before, which we know has a profound impact on our health? So last year we published a transport strategy and implementation plans. Now that was quite an ambitious strategy that built on healthy routes we'd already worked out, and looked at creating low traffic neighbourhoods throughout our borough on a rolling basis and when resources allowed us to. And we were also already undertaking some specific bigger projects, for example, Transport for London, such as Brixton Liverpool neighbourhood. So our emergency strategy, we built on that data and evidence that we already had. And what we're going to be doing is we're accelerating those measures. So this may involve no entries, it may involve restricted access, modal filters, barriers across the road. I mean, we're going to constantly have to review our programme because it is an emergency response, so we need to be agile and responsive. So the first one we're introducing in the next few weeks is a low traffic neighbourhood area in the north of the borough. We already have a temporary traffic order in place in this area because it's part of the Vauxhall Nine Elms development area. So we didn't have to do that, and that has enabled us to be responsive and agile, as I said. And then we're moving on to another area just south of Brixton, because we know that's a key route of residents coming from the south of the borough into Brixton town centre, as I said, to access employment, shopping, to support our local economy, to get it back up and running. In terms of challenges ahead, and we're going to expand this out to other areas, and we're looking at things like temporary bike lanes as well. So it's all in the report, it's in phases, and we're adding to the report as time goes on, and we're learning more about how we do this in these unprecedented times.
So on that note, one thing that was interesting, I think will be interesting to many of the people dialed in, is you did something unusual, or relatively unusual. You issued a borough-wide traffic notice about the need to make plans, that you have a evolving traffic order plan for the whole borough. And my impression, talking to traffic engineers, is that something that then accelerates your ability then to make further changes as time passes. Is that right?
That's right, absolutely. So as I said, we already had one in place in the north of the borough since 2016, because of the huge construction works that have been going on in Vauxhall development area. But yes, we're introducing a whole borough-wide traffic management order, and then doing the specific regs that we need to in the different areas, which does mean that we can be more responsive, absolutely. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, should it be an experimental traffic order or whatever, and I know I'm not a traffic engineer, I'm not a town planner or anything, but I know there are different sections, and ours is under section 14 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act, I think 1983, I think it is, I'm not sure. But for us, that we feel that gives us, it enables us to have a strategy so that we can then within that make changes and be more responsive. Subject to funding, which I do have to touch on, Chris, because funding is obviously key. In our first phase, we got £78,000 agreed, and that was basically to do that immediate pavement widening and to pay for the borough-wide traffic order, etc. We're going to need to release more funds, and what concerns us is the dire situation in London of Transport for London and how that's going to impact for London councils and those other major projects and that interplay with TfL. And also we know that we've had 10 years of austerity, so we weren't in great positions anyway financially as councils, but also we really want to ensure that the government do stick to their pledge and do pay us what we need for these emergencies, because this is our response to COVID-19.
I think that's going to be very clear. I mean, I think a big question for central government will be whether or not it wants to continue with a commitment to £27 billion of new road building, or whether or not it meets what certainly the Labour Party called for in the last general election, which is that 10% of the transport budget, which is about £3 billion a year, must be committed on an ongoing basis to active travel, both walking and cycling. I just want to, I'm going to go around the panel, and I want to come back with, and we'll have lots of questions. Just a couple of things for folks who are dialed in. The hashtag for this call is #StreetSpace. And I'm also going to launch a poll for councillors or council officers who are dialed in, just asking you some questions about where you are in your planning process. That's going to be kept anonymous, but it's useful for us to have data about how people are approaching it nationwide.